Hello, everybody. Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report. It's Monday's edition, and we're broadcasting from beautiful but hot and sunny Delray Beach, Florida. Happy to have you with us today, folks, and we've got a lot to cover. I hope all of you all enjoyed college and NFL football over the weekend. Wow, some incredible games, just insane outcomes. And that's typical of the first few weeks of the season, but congratulations to the winners. And there were some incredible upsets in college football for sure. I don't think anyone expected on one weekend that Texas A&M and Notre Dame would go down, but they did. And in the NFL, it's just insane. So look, let's get to some of the hot topics of the day here and welcome you back from your football feast. Look, first thing I want to do, there's a lot of media misinformation out there. So I want to get right down to it on what's really happening in some of these Senate races across the country. Because as everybody's expecting, it's very close. It could go either way. So regardless of whatever propaganda you hear from the left or the right, these races, all of them almost are within the margin of error. They could tilt either way. Candidates matter, voter turnout matters, and issues matter on a state-by-state basis. So I wanted to break down a couple of them for you so you could just get a sense, of where we are. Let's start in Arizona. Mark Kelly, a short 2-point lead. Now, Kelly, he will be going for his first term as a full 6-year term. Kelly won a race defeating Martha McSally in Arizona. So Kelly's up by 2 points right now against Blake Masters. Okay, that's close, within the margin of error. Again, could go either way, leans slightly in Kelly's favor right now. But we'll see how that one ends up playing out. It's a seat currently held by the Democrats. So if Kelly wins that seat, there's no net pickup there. The second and really interesting race is going on in Georgia, where Herschel Walker and Raphael Warnock are squaring off. Warnock, again, he won a runoff election. So he basically served 1 year in the Senate. Actually, two years. So Herschel Walker, the former football star, successful businessman. Walker was initially behind Warnock, but now he seems to have refined his game. His speeches are better. The message is getting out. People realize that Raphael Warnock is nothing more than a stamp for Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden. And people don't necessarily want that in the state of Georgia. Walker's now plus 3 points, and he's got some momentum at his back. But again, I want to caution you. People that think, well, it's over. No, it's not even close to over. These races ebb and flow. They go back and forth. A lot's going to depend upon voter turnout. Will the Republicans get out there and vote? Well, Warnock, I'm thinking both of them will. I think the key in Georgia is going to be how the independent voters break. And a lot of that's going to depend upon what happens over the next 30 days. It's a very close race with a slight edge to Walker. So if he were to pick up a win here, that would be a net +1 for Republicans. So, keep that in the back of your mind as we go through these. Florida, a very, very competitive race between Marco Rubio and Val Demings. I'm here in the state of Florida. Val Demings is blanketing the airwaves with tough on crime issues because she was a former police commissioner in Orlando. Look, you and I both know the Democratic Party stands for defund the police. They've been doing it. The Democratic Party is for the convicts, not the victims. The Democratic Party has done everything in their power to no bail laws, let criminals out, repeat offenders commit crimes. That's why crime all across the country is up. I find it comical and almost fraudulent that Val Demings, who was a former police officer and police chief captain, again, is running on a tough on crime issue when you know as well as I do, if she were to pull an upset and defeat Rubio, again, she's going to vote with all the Democrats on defunding police, anything negative on law enforcement, getting people out of jail-free cards. You know the drill that the Democrats do. But it is a close race, much closer than people anticipated. Look, folks, I've told you for a long time, races are always close in Florida. When Rick Scott won his last race against Bill Nelson, he won by 0.25%. Ron DeSantis won by 0.5%. Now, Florida has been trending red. Okay, Donald Trump won the state twice. So again, Florida has a Republican state House, a Republican state Senate, a Republican governor, 2 United States senators, and a majority of the House are Republican. But again, candidates matter. Val Demings is a good candidate. She came out of the House of Representatives. Marco Rubio is an excellent candidate. Marco Rubio basically validates Florida voters, and he supports initiatives that the people of the state of Florida want. But it's a tight race. Rubio +2 over Val Demings, and if Rubio keeps that seat, obviously it's net neutral. My expectation is it's going to be a very close race, but the Rubio will be able to retain that seat. North Carolina. Now, there was some concern about this earlier on, about 30 days ago, but Bud has pulled out to a 3-point lead. Again, small lead, could go either way. Again, when you're plus or minus inside 3 or 4 points, which is generally the margin of error, it's anybody's race. So again, North Carolina, razor thin margin. It's going to come down to candidates and issues and turnout. Here's a fascinating one here in Nevada. Cortez Masto, an existing senator who is not popular in the state, running against Adam Laxalt, who is a famous name in the state of Nevada. Look, Cortez, I've seen polls where Laxalt's up, Cortez Mastro's up. When you average them out, Cortez Mastro's up by a point. Effectively, the race is tied. If Laxalt were to win that seat, it would be a pickup for the Republicans. If Cortez Masto were to retain it, it would be net neutral for the Democrats. So that's one that Republican lawmakers really have their eyes on, because if they can win Georgia and Nevada, well, that gives them +2. Then they could be in a situation where they could afford to lose one more and win the Senate. But even if they lost 2, the Senate would remain 50-50. So the way it's looking in my crystal ball right now is +1. But we got 2 more races to get to here. Pennsylvania, this is a real head scratcher for me. John Fetterman, the lieutenant governor, he's up 5 points on Dr. Oz. Fetterman is a radical liberal. Now, again, he would be replacing Senator Pat Toomey, who is a conservative. Is Pennsylvania really going to go from Pat Toomey, a conservative, to John Fetterman, a radical liberal, along the lines of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren? I don't know. Polling shows him up by about 5 points right now, which is outside the margin of error. So Oz is going to have to come on strong here in the last 45 days of the campaign, because, does Pennsylvania want to elect a radical liberal along Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren? I don't think so. I mean, this guy walks around with a hoodie all the time. You don't know anything about it. We'll see what happens when Oz and Fetterman debate. But right now, if Fetterman were to win that race, that would be a +1 pickup for the Democrats. So if you had Herschel Walker winning +1 Republicans, Fetterman +1 Democrats, that evens it out. So you'd be at a 50-50 Senate. Let's get into the next race. It's really fascinating. Mandela Barnes, current lieutenant governor up in Wisconsin, running against Senator Ron Johnson. For the last 2 times Ron Johnson's won in his election, they predicted he would lose both times, but he's won. Now, right now, he's behind Mandela Barnes by 3 points, within the margin of error. But again, the question is, are Republicans being sampled properly in Wisconsin? We don't know. But if you accept the results of that polling, then Ron Johnson has his work cut out for him. If Mandela Barnes were to win that race, coupled with Fetterman and Cortez Masto holding serve, Democrats would actually pick up 1 seat in the Senate, and it would be 51-49. Now, there's other races we could talk about. Pennsylvania, Leora Levy is running against Dick Blumenthal. Polls show Blumenthal leading by 10 points or so. Maybe yes, maybe no. Could Leora Levy pull up an upset there? Maybe. Her policies are certainly spot on. And a lot of people in Connecticut, Blumenthal was underwater on his approval. We'll see how that one goes. And you've got other races across the country where things are going to be tight. But we focused on those 7 races because those are all swing states, and they could go either way. Now, let me shift over to the House of Representatives. Okay, we've been telling you on this show for a long time. We thought that the Republicans would take the House. It would be a smaller margin than pundits were predicting. We were saying basically in the 10 to 15, 20 range. Real Clear Politics average of polling, and that's a pretty good barometer here, plus 22 seats. I think they're a little high, but my expectation is somewhere 15 seats or more. The Republicans will take the House, and Kevin McCarthy will become Speaker of the House. Now, there's all kind of pundits weighing in on why are Republicans not winning more? And everybody's trying to blame Trump. I'm not buying 1 ounce of that. I think things will tighten up as you get closer to the midterms. They do every year. But at the end of the day, I believe, based upon the Biden policies and the things that are most important to Americans that they're going to vote for, I believe Republicans will continue to do well and take the House of Representatives. I think, again, in the Senate, plus or minus 1 or 2 could go either way. So everything in the Senate is tight. Now, let's talk about a couple of high-profile governor's races. Governor Kemp in Georgia is up by 6 over the Democrats' favorite Democrat, Stacey Abrams. That's right. The same Stacey Abrams who lost 4 years ago is now losing by 6 points to Brian Kemp. Good for Kemp. Kemp deserves to win this race by a landslide. Stacey Abrams would be a horrible governor for the state of Georgia. Her policies are backwards looking, radically too liberal for the state of Georgia. She's the Democratic media superstar. All the mainstream media, you know the drill, MSNBC, CNN, ABC, NBC, and the Washington Post, New York Times, et al. They all are pulling for Stacey Abrams. But the people in Georgia are saying, wait a minute here. Brian Kemp's done a good job as governor. He shepherded us and steered us through the COVID situation. Unemployment's very low in Georgia. The economy's good in Georgia. Good policies. Brian Kemp leading by 6. And in Florida, Ron DeSantis, albeit in a relatively close race, he's up by 5 on Charlie Crist. Again, races in Florida are tight. Now, a lot of people will say, depending upon what happens, well, I can already see the setup. If DeSantis wins and say he pulls it out by 2, 3, 4 points, the media is already setting him up as well. Oh my God, he was running against Charlie Crist. He doesn't have national appeal. They're already setting him up to fail, depending on how much he wins by. Okay, fine, we can play that game. Voters in Florida know Ron DeSantis has been an excellent governor. His policies are good. He has championed conservative causes. Liberals are outraged. They can't stand this guy. And then the gay community, whatever the hell they call it, don't say gay bill, mischaracterizing everything in the bill. DeSantis's position that, women should be in women's sports, men should be in men's sports. I mean, it's got the liberals infuriated. So they're pouring a lot of money in behind Charlie Crist. But at the end of the day, Ron DeSantis is very favorable ratings. Favorability ratings like 55% of the state. So our expectation is DeSantis will win. It will be close. Races are close. Why are they close, Mark, you say? Well, I'll tell you why. Because a lot of Democrats move down to Florida from the Northeast, and they come down here for low taxes and good weather. Good weather. It's hot down here, folks. It is hot. And they bring their liberal values with them. My position is this. If you like the liberals, the policies in the North, stay up north. Pay those high taxes. Support those liberal policies. Come down here to Florida. It's a conservative state. Look, it will be tight. Again, when Ron DeSantis defeated the crackhead Andrew Gillum 4 years ago, he only won by half a point. And Gillum ended up being a crackhead in a hotel room with crystal meth all over the floor, and he got arrested. So, that tells you Democrats who they'll vote for. Again, party identity is really important here in Florida. Republicans have an edge, but it's not a gigantic edge. Ron DeSantis will win, but it'll be close. So that's sort of a summary on a national scale. Again, to repeat, very tight in the Senate. Nothing's changed there. A lot of races within the margin of error. Our projection is around 15 seats in the House. RCP, Real Clear Politics, says it at 22. Governor's races, Republicans are doing generally well. So this media hysteria about, the abortion issue is killing the Republicans. No, it has had some effect for sure. But at the end of the day, this country is made up of 33% Democrats, 31% Republicans, and the balance are independents. Independents will determine the makeup of the House and Senate. Kid you not. Biden's approval rating among Democrats, it'll go up as you get closer to election. He's currently polling in mid to upper 70s. He'll get that number in the upper 80s by the time they go to vote. No question. Republicans are going to vote for Republicans, upper 90s. The independents are going to be the telltale. We'll see how that plays itself out. Now, let's get to some both international news, and I'll come to some domestic stuff here with you. People are amazed what is happening in Ukraine. Why? The U.S. weapons system that had been delivered to the Ukrainians with training are having a significant effect on that war. The Ukrainians have launched counteroffensives, and they have taken back 1,100 square miles in the northern part of the country. They had a Russian group surrounded. Bridges were blown up. They had no way out. Russians are taking major casualties. Putin is replacing generals like popsicles and melting in the Florida heat. I mean, the troop losses, the equipment losses the Russians are suffering are devastating, and the Ukrainians are fighting, for their home country. So again, the occupiers, the Russians, are facing severe consequences. Now, Xi and Putin are meeting in Kazakhstan this Wednesday. You better believe that the war in Ukraine topic is going to be on the table. The question is, with the Ukrainians clearly having an upper hand in taking back part of the country, what happens next? Will the Russians continue to pour more troops into the meat grinder, despite the fact that people at home are just, they're seeing the numbers, they're seeing the dead, they're seeing the turning of the war against the Russians, and the Russians have a hard time spending it. I mean, let's face it, when you have over 50,000 people that have been killed, and that number is growing every day, and the amount of equipment that the Russians are lost, the territory that is being taken back to the Ukrainians by the Ukrainians, it's no secret that public opinion, were legitimate in Russia, would be against Putin. People are upset with it. Now, what's that going to lead to? I'm not going to predict that going forward, but obviously there's significant international effect on that. Oil prices have been maintained in the low to mid 90s. Gasoline prices came down in this country 85 straight days. There's a belief now prices may have bottomed and could start going up. And there's an international effort abroad to put a price cap on Russian oil. That is gaining some steam. I don't know how effective it's going to be. But the point is, when this war started back in February, would you have looked fast forward to September and believed the Ukrainians would be winning counteroffensives? Wow, shows what really determination they have fighting for their own country. And the Russians, obviously, they're still bewildered as to why they're even in this war. And the Russian soldiers, again, you hear about 52,000 people killed. Think about how many people have been wounded in addition to that. And mothers and families seeing their grieving sons injured or killed. Wow, that is a disaster. So, where it goes from here, like I said, Xi and Putin are going to meet. I'm sure that's going to be a primary topic, and we'll talk about it more as the week goes on. A couple domestic issues I want to get to. Did you notice the piece over the weekend where now if you buy a gun and pay for it with a credit card, that information is going to be reported to government agencies? Obviously, the National Rifle Association is not happy about that. That's what's happening now. So again, for those people who are gun enthusiasts, if you go out and buy a gun and you want to pay for it with a credit card, your information is being reported to a government agency. That's new policies that went into effect. And we talked earlier about things that are most important to Americans. Gas prices have come down, but they're still elevated, double what they were when Trump was president. And inflation is still very high. Wage inflation is going up. Food prices are still high, and that's not going to change as we head into the winter. And two other issues are the American people are really important on. One is crime. We continue to see these horrific crime sprees in these democratic cities. We saw what happened in Memphis last week. We saw what's happened in the Bay Area, in New York. I can go on and on. It never changes. Same story every weekend. Crime escalates. People get killed. The Democrats say nothing about it. So people are concerned about that. And again, they're also concerned about 2 million people crossing the border. Well, Texas continues to send migrants up north. The fourth busload arrived in Chicago. So again, Texas can't handle all this, and the Biden administration clearly is doing nothing to stem the flow of the illegal immigrants. So folks, whether it's illegal immigration, crime, inflation, I mean, you name it, the Biden administration screws it up royally. So the independent voters, they're going to be really the ones that weigh in on the report card and say, do we want 2 more years of Biden, or do we want to have a check on his policies? Hopefully rationality will come to the American people, and between the House and the Senate, we can get a check on these policies, because they're really horrific, folks. And you have Democrats galore coming out, Kamala Harris at the top of the shouting list saying, well, we need to control the Senate, then we can get rid of the filibuster. Well, really, Kamala, not so fast. That there's a few Democratic senators opposed to that. Believe me, folks, there's more opposed to it. They just didn't want to say anything when everything was going on with Manchin and Sinema. But there was a belief if they could ever get to 52-48 Senate, they could undo the filibuster. That may be true. But the old saying, ask not what you wish for, because what you wish for, you may regret. But we'll see. We'll keep an eye on that, how it plays itself out. Another thing, Americans are pretty fair-minded people. When the city of Minneapolis, get a load of this, folks, they announced a policy that if there were any layoffs or firings, it would be white teachers first. Forget seniority, forget job rankings, forget all of that. They're basing it on skin color. Well, obviously that's illegal. The city of Minneapolis has been sued. I mean, can you imagine if people came out and said, well, the first people are going to be fired are black teachers? You would have outrage in this country, people marching up and down the Capitol. But when it came out, well, no, we're going to fire white people, you didn't see marching up and down or people yelling and screaming from the roofs. But you did see the legal system get into play. It's clearly unconstitutional. It'll be overturned. But just the gall of the Minneapolis City Council to do this. I know it's a radical city council. Again, we're well aware of that. But we have a system of checks and balances in this country, and that's one of them. So people cannot be fired or shouldn't be fired, hired, disciplined based on the color of their skin. Boy, talk about violating everything Martin Luther King stood for. He'd be appalled at the Minneapolis City Council if I come across with policy such as that. That's just insane. Now, I want to close it out with this, okay? Over the weekend was the 21st anniversary of 9/11. Most Americans aged, obviously anyone aged mid-20s or higher knows where they were when that happened. The most prolific terrorist attack in the history of the country, 3,000 plus Americans and multiple people from many nationalities killed. It's not just Americans. We had over 3,000 people killed in the terrorist attack. I did notice somewhat muted coverage, if you will. I understand that 20th anniversary got a lot of coverage, but we should never forget what happened on 9/11. It's one of those seminal events that happened in the country, much like the attack on Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1945, when Roosevelt was president, and when George Bush was president here. Everybody will remember him standing in New York, basically referencing that he would find the terrorists that did this, which we ultimately did. But we want to obviously keep that in our minds, since that anniversary did occur over the weekend. And we as Americans always will keep those fellow Americans and fellow non-Americans that passed away while serving the various countries in New York City. So it's great to be back. We're still on the road. We'll be back at home office in California later this week. But again, pay attention to what's going on. We'll cut through the propaganda. One other closing point. Have you noticed Biden still doesn't do news conferences? I mean, my goodness, this guy is like an embarrassment to be president. You never can get a straight answer out of him. He's like an old school politician. Never takes questions head on, and just they keep him in hiding. It's sort of like the same strategy they did when he ran for election. Boy, I tell you what, you may agree or disagree, but at least let's get him out there where he faces the press. Just an embarrassment. Okay, folks, that's it for today. Again, thanks for viewing and listening. We'll be back tomorrow. Stay safe. See you on Tuesday.